The 7 levels of zombie apocalypse. Explained.
Level 1.
Misdiagnosed. We're starting at the bottom, and I want to be precise about what the bottom means here, because it's not bad movies. The bottom is, these projects got zombie apocalypse stamped on their birth certificate and never actually earned it. Return of the Living Dead. I need you to sit with this one for a second, because the zombies in this movie talk. They negotiate. They philosophize about brain cravings, like they're doing a TED Talk on nutrition, complete with a slide deck I assume exists somewhere in the afterlife. One of them drives a truck to a crematorium, which is a level of vehicular competence most human extras in this genre don't even have. Warm bodies. A zombie falls in love, and through the sheer transformative power of feelings, slowly regains his humanity. I want to be extremely clear. This isn't horror. This is a Nicholas Sparks novel that got bitten in a parking lot and decided, against all odds, to lean into it. There is no apocalypse happening here. Cooties. The outbreak, in its entirety, is contained to one elementary school. That's not an apocalypse. That's a Tuesday. That's a school district dealing with a vending machine that's been unplugged since spring break, and a substitute teacher who's had enough. Zombievers. I want you to read that title out loud to yourself, slowly, and really consider what a pitch meeting for that must have sounded like. Somebody in a room, with a straight face, said the words zombie beavers, and somebody else said yes, and let's get funding. The zombie label here isn't a threat model. It's a punchline that stumbled into a distribution deal. Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. Contained to one town for the entire duration of a teen comedy's runtime. The stakes never once leave the parking lot of the strip mall they're clearly filming behind, and somehow the title still promises us a full apocalypse. False advertising, but make it Boy Scouts. My boyfriend's back. 1. Single, revived corpse. Singular. That's not an outbreak. That's a really awkward high school ex who won't take the hint and keeps showing up to prom. And look, before anyone in the comments does the thing where they type, well, actually this counts, because, no, I've thought about this more than is medically advisable for a person with other responsibilities.
Level 2.
Schlock Dead Alive, also released as Brain Dead. Legendary, genre-defining, career-launching in fact, for a director who would eventually go make elves respectable in New Zealand for 3 back-to-back movies and several Oscars. The practical gore in this film is a masterclass. Genuinely, film schools use it as a teaching text. The plot, however, barely survives its own 90-minute runtime. It's a technical marvel, having a full medical episode in real time. And somehow, that's the point. Dead snow, Nazi zombies. That's the entire pitch, and it is, genuinely, an incredible pitch. I would greenlight this in about 4 seconds flat, no notes, take my money. The problem is, the script cashes out its own genius by the end of Act 2 and just coasts on vibes and snow for the rest of the runtime, like a kid who peaked in the first quarter of the game and just started dribbling in circles for the remaining 3. Redneck zombies. Pure, unfiltered VHS-era shock value, with roughly 0 structural ambition beyond what if things were gross, on purpose, for 90 minutes, and nobody stopped us. Doghouse. A genuinely clever, bachelor party gone wrong premise that develops pacing whiplash in its back half, like it forgot its own plan somewhere around the second round of drinks and just started improvising the rest of the night. Zombie strippers. The title is doing about 80% more narrative labor than the actual film ever attempts. Everything you need to know, you already know, and the movie knows it too. It's basically just confirming your suspicions for 90 minutes. Biozombie. Genuinely stylish, mall-set outbreak thriller, completely hamstrung by a budget that very clearly ran out several scenes before the plot did. You can watch the money disappear in real time, like a ghost, if the ghost were also a receipt. Give that same unhinged chaos an actual studio budget and a marketing department, and something much worse happens to it. It stops being fun on purpose.
Level 3.
Sanitized. This is the corporate tier, and I want you to brace yourself, because this is where good ideas go, to get a performance review, get placed on an improvement plan, and then quietly get let go in a Zoom call with the camera off. World War Z, the 2013 film, global-scale spectacle, on paper, in execution, sanded down into a PG-13 runner aesthetic with absolutely none of the source material's creeping systemic dread. Brad Pitt outrunning a zombie horde like he's just trying to make his connecting flight, and politely declines to check a bag. Resident Evil, Apocalypse, franchise machine sequel. All style, zero retention. I would bet actual money that most people who saw this in theaters could not describe a single plot beat from it 12 months later, myself included, and I watched it twice, specifically for this video, and I already feel it evaporating from my brain as I say this sentence out loud. Zombieland, double tap, competent, funny, even, in places, adds essentially nothing to what the original film had already perfected a decade earlier. It's the sequel that showed up to the family reunion and just told the exact same stories from last time, slightly louder, hoping nobody would notice. Army of the Dead, Snyder brand visual gloss bolted onto a heist movie gimmick, and somehow both halves managed to cancel each other out entirely, forgotten within the same news cycle it premiered in, which is genuinely impressive for a movie with a reported budget the size of a small country's annual GDP. Peninsula, a glossy, expensive sequel to Train to Busan that traded the original's suffocating intimacy for wide-shot spectacle. It's the cinematic equivalent of swapping a home-cooked meal for a hotel continental breakfast. Technically food, technically related, missing the entire point of eating in the first place. Cell, Stephen King's source material, genuine A-list leads attached, and somehow the finished film is flatter than the paperback's actual cover art. A truly impressive inversion of the adaptation process, and not the good kind of impressive.
Level 4.
Fractured. This is the I could actually scream tier. Genuinely good. Sometimes genuinely great. In extended stretches. The Walking Dead, the television series. Groundbreaking. Culturally massive. Appointment television for years running, and then capped by a mid-series pacing collapse so well documented at this point, it basically has its own dedicated subheading on fan wikis, complete with a timeline of grievances. The Girl with All the Gifts. A genuinely brilliant new mechanic introduced into the genre's own biology. I won't spoil it. Go watch it. Undercut by a third act that very clearly ran out of production money the same week it ran out of narrative ideas, which is a genuinely unfortunate coincidence to have twice. I Am Legend. Two genuinely strong acts, capped by a studio-mandated alternate ending that swapped out something bleaker, stranger, and considerably better for something a test audience found more comfortable. Corporate note-giving strikes again, right on schedule, like clockwork with a focus group attached to the gears. Land of the Dead. George Romero's class satire ambitions running at full intellectual capacity, capped by weaker practical execution than the man's own earlier, cheaper work. The mind was completely willing. The prosthetics budget, tragically, was weak, and it shows in almost every frame. Pontypool. A genuinely original infection mechanic. The virus spreads through language itself, through specific words, capped by stagey, budget-limited execution that can't quite fully realize its own smartest idea. It's a movie with a brilliant thesis, stuck defending that thesis in what is essentially a radio booth for 90 minutes, like a TED Talk that's also trying to kill you. The Cured. A fascinating premise about cured zombies attempting to re-enter society, capped by low visibility and a small-scale finish that never lets its central idea actually breathe the way it deserves to. It's a great short story, trapped inside a modest film budget. A crack is one thing. Now take a story that's almost entirely whole, and name, out loud, specifically, no hiding behind vague adjectives, the single piece that's still missing.
Level 5.
Unfinished. This is also, and I say this with love, the tier where the sarcasm has to take a short unpaid break. 28 Days Later. Visionary. Genuinely terrifying in a way most modern horror still can't replicate, more than 2 decades later. Missing only global-scale consequence, because the outbreak stays contained to the UK, which technically makes this a regional catastrophe rather than a true, planet-wide apocalypse. Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake. Relentless, stylish, kinetic in a way that permanently redefined how fast a zombie is allowed to sprint at you on screen. Missing Romero's original satirical depth, all muscle, considerably less brain, which is admittedly a little ironic for a movie about creatures whose entire dietary preference is brain specifically. The Last of Us, the HBO series. Emotionally devastating, gorgeously produced, missing only a genuinely new zombie mechanic beyond what the source game had already built years prior. It perfected the adaptation, and in doing so, inherited the game's exact ceiling right along with it, tile for tile. Zombieland, the original, beloved, endlessly quotable, missing real dread because the comedy itself caps how far the actual tension is ever allowed to escalate before the next joke shows up to diffuse it. Shaun of the Dead, genre perfect in almost every conceivable way, missing large-scale apocalyptic weight because the story stays hyper-local to one neighborhood and, crucially, one specific pub, which is arguably the most British limitation a movie has ever had. All of Us Are Dead, a strong, stylish, well-produced outbreak thriller, missing a truly distinct ending beyond standard genre convention, like a great meal that forgets to bring dessert. Missing one single thing is forgivable. Now look at the entries, missing almost nothing at all.
Level 6.
Almost, I want to be honest with you. Writing this tier was genuinely hard because every single one of these entries is one Reddit argument away from just being level 7 material. Resident Evil, the video game franchise as a whole, genre-defining, foundational, held back by tonal whiplash, diluting its own canon across 2+ decades of entries that fundamentally can't agree on what kind of scared they want the player to be, ranging from Haunted Mansion to action movie with zombies as set dressing, The Last of Us Part 1, the 2013 game. Near universally worshipped, critically adored, held back by a divisive ending choice that split its own dedicated fanbase into two warring factions, who, to this day, will still argue about it in a comment section completely unprompted, on a video about something entirely unrelated. 28 weeks later, a ferocious, genuinely brutal sequel, held back by narrative sprawl in its final act, as though the script had one more great idea left in the tank and simply ran out of runtime to properly deploy it before the credits demanded to roll. Train to Busan, near flawless, tightly constructed, held back by an ending some critics call slightly too sentimental for a film this consistently brutal everywhere else, which is honestly a very specific and very Korean cinema kind of problem to have. Resident Evil, the 2002 film, the founding entry of the entire video game movie zombie genre, held back only by now-dated CGI that has, unfortunately, not aged like fine wine so much as aged like milk, left out during a power outage in July. Kingdom, the Korean series, elite, meticulously plotted, held back by a rushed final stretch compared to the sheer surgical control of its opening seasons, like a marathon runner who sprints the last mile for entirely the wrong reasons.
Level 7.
Undead. This is the tier with no notes, flawless, culturally permanent, unarguable, in the truest sense of the word. I have tried, personally, to argue with these picks while writing this script. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Invented the modern zombie mythology from absolutely nothing. Every single entry on this entire list, including the deeply unhinged ones from level 1 that were talking and driving trucks, owes this film a direct, unpaid, compounding debt it will never be able to repay. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. Permanently fused zombie horror with genuine social satire, in a shopping mall of all places. Consumerism as the true horror, which is either brilliant or extremely on the nose, and honestly both. The setting itself became the template that every corporate tier film sitting in level 3 is still, to this day, quietly failing to live up to. World War Z, the Max Brooks novel, not the film. Those are two entirely separate creatures wearing the same title, related the way a wolf is related to a hot dog. The definitive text on zombie apocalypse as total global systems collapse, cited, genuinely, in actual academic and military circles as the genre's most complete thought experiment. The film adaptation didn't just miss this mark, it missed an entire continent, and then reshot the miss in Wales. The Walking Dead, the Kirkman comic series, reshaped mainstream pop culture's entire relationship with zombie fiction for well over a decade, long before the television adaptation started tripping over its own barbed wire bat. Resident Evil 2, the 1998 video game, a unanimous classic, defined survival horror mechanics that games are still borrowing, often uncredited, to this very day, like an ancestor nobody thanks at the family reunion. I Am Legend, the Richard Matheson novel from 1954, the original, one man against an entire infected world text. Every single entry across this whole 7-tier framework, the good ones and the deeply cursed ones, is descended in some way from this one book, whether they know it or not. If you want to see the 7 levels of horror movie monsters ranked with this exact same rigor, there's a companion video linked right here that pairs perfectly with this one. Thanks for watching.